I'm Emma Murphy, and these were my thoughts on the Children's Hour and our roundtable discussion. So, first, we talked about what we thought about the movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought for like the entertainment aspect, I would watch it again. I really liked it. I loved how it featured a woman heavy cast, and even though Karen had a love interest, it wasn't all about that, wasn't the main plot of the story. I also thought the film did a really good job of showing unrequited love, and Karen's whole reaction was really heartbreaking because you could see she was trying to understand Martha, but she couldn't. And I loved how their friendship was portrayed. And even though Karen didn't understand Martha's feelings, she didn't look at her like a monster like everyone else did and really cared about her. So I thought that the way that they showed their friendship was really good. I really liked that. And then something I didn't say in the roundtable, but I remembered later, I really liked how they showed Martha as feminine and not masculine, because I feel like a Hollywood stereotype for lesbians is very traditionally masculine. So I really liked that aspect of it too. And then Morgan talked about her scene and talked about the production code, and I added like a little something in the white reading and uninvited. The author talks about the production code and includes that, like, the production code includes the viewer's impression of queer content. And even though the film was made when the rules were more relaxed, we talked all about that and how it started out as a play, and then it was adapted and then adapted again when the rules were pretty much over. But I think that's a big part of why it was allowed in the first place, was because of the like harmful narratives it told about homosexual characters. The film stereotyped the lesbian as the tragic character and fed into the misconception of queer people not existing or hiding themselves. And then I talked about that a lot in this scene that I picked. So I picked a scene where Martha tells Karen that all the rumors are true and that she has feelings for her. I thought it was a really powerful scene because through the dialogue, you can see Martha trying to convince herself that she loves Karen as a friend. And she said things like, there are people who have chosen it for themselves, but we aren't like that, and that women loving their friends is perfectly natural. But as it progresses, you see her start to realize, and she says, maybe I love you the way they say I love you. And we see the conflict that she has within herself because she doesn't understand about reality that she could actually love Karen like that, because it's obviously not a topic that's talked about, judging from the reactions of all the other characters. She says, maybe I wanted you all these years, but I couldn't call it by name before. And that reminded me of the clip that we watched in class from A League of Our Own, when Carson walks into the gay bar and is in disbelief because she didn't know people could live and be comfortable with their sexuality, because it just wasn't a reality. And I think Martha genuinely didn't understand her feelings for Karen because there was nothing in her life that could explain them. And then this part like feeds into the misconception that we talked about in class with the Pride documentary, that queer people were in the deep, dark days of the closet and that homosexuality wasn't a thing. And then Martha ended up committing suicide in the end because when she came to the realization that she had feelings for Karen, she had no future because she couldn't conceptualize the idea of homosexuality. And then now when we look back at the film, it furthers our understanding of queer people as a new thing historically, because Martha had no way to conceptualize homosexuality. And then the scene, we also see them use the queer stereotype as the tragic character to make the audience pity Martha and feel sympathy after she tells Karen that she does love her, like the rumor said. In this scene especially, they made the audience feel sorry for her, not because it was a heartbreaking moment like it was for me watching it through a queer lens, but the fact that she acknowledged that her feelings were unnatural. And Martha said that she ruined their lives and didn't mean to have feelings for Karen. and she calls herself sick and dirty. And even if it wasn't the director's intention, Martha calling herself sick and dirty was like a direct message to the audience saying this is what happens when you're a homosexual, which sucks because not only does the film stereotype Martha, it's telling the audience that queer people are unnatural. And then in the Doty reading, the author talked about how your perception of media can change depending on the lens you use. And even though this film has queer themes, I think you still have to choose what lens you interpret it with. Using a queer lens is watching the film and understanding the implications it has on queer people, like we're doing. But without this lens, I think the audience back then would understand it as a cautionary tale. And just because you're watching a film about queer people doesn't mean you're using a queer lens. So those were the notes that I had on my scene. And then when we were talking, Logan mentioned that she watched it first without a queer lens because she doesn't normally consume media with a queer lens. I do. Everything that I read or watch has some sort of queer implications, but for her it didn't. So we talked about how I said that I thought having her thoughts on it was really important, and how like valuable her perspective is because it's a different opinion and we don't consume media the same way. So I was really happy that she talked about that because we experienced the movie in totally different ways, at least the first time she watched it, but I thought that was really interesting. And then we had a conversation about how we wished queer media would show like normal queer relationships instead of having like a huge plot point surrounding the queer aspect of their life, because I feel like a lot of the media we have now talks about like every gay person I feel like is portrayed in a way that it always has something to do with their sexuality. And I didn't say this in the roundtable because I wanted everyone to get a chance to talk, but over the summer I read a book called Our Wives Under the Sea, and it was about like a lesbian couple, but the book had nothing to do with the fact that they were lesbians. They just happened to be, and it was really refreshing because, and I've been thinking about this throughout class, and how every movie or every TV show that we watch with queer characters, it always has something to do with the fact that they're queer. And while that's really good for representation and for other people, like straight people, to get that, to learn about it, it's also, we watch the same things over and over again, and it always has something to do with that. So I thought that was really interesting. And then Logan also talked about Modern Family and how she liked the representation of queer people as like a normal family. And then me and Morgan were joking, and I said, just wait until she learns about homonormativity. And then we had a whole conversation about that, which was really interesting because this is something that I think about a lot. But for someone who doesn't use a queer lens for everything they watch, I thought it was really interesting to like hear Logan's thoughts, because she was like, I love how they're just a normal queer couple. And I was like, yeah, that's what they want you to think about them. That's because, of course, they're both gay white men. Of course, they, one of them is more feminine. That's what the media wants to show because it's normalizing queer people. And then Maya mentioned that when she was watching it, she was like, oh, this is so sad. And like, again, she's not really someone who reads things with a queer lens. So she mentioned that the movie was really sad, and she said that she hoped that queer movies weren't always like this. And me and Morgan were like, no, like they are. Every we feel like every queer movie or TV show or book, something tragic always happens to the gay character, or it gets canceled, they get killed off. Like, it really is. And it made me think about how, like, the same things are still happening, and it's like 50, 60 years after, and the same things are happening, and that's really unfortunate. And then Morgan asked the discussion question, how are film professionals so good at conveying queer experience so that it was obvious but subtle enough to pass the production code? And I was thinking about it as, like, the directors, it's not hard to, like, show a relationship on screen, and queer people are still people and still have relationships just like straight people would. I mean, it looks a little different, but queer people are still people, and it's still a relationship between two people. So I feel like it's not very hard to show love on screen. And then once the directors decided the character's fate, it was really easy, I feel like, to play into the stereotypes. So that's why I think they were so good at, like, showing the queer experience, because it did look like a queer director made the movie, but in reality, I do think it was easy for them to show a relationship and then play into the stereotypes. And then my discussion question was, in the short clip we watched in class, the actress who played Martha said she didn't do the film right and that Martha would have fought instead of breaking down. And then she said, the actress said no one questioned the alternative. So I asked, what do you think the alternative could have been? Could there have been a reality where Martha didn't hide herself? Or do you think the film's ending was the only possibility? And it was really interesting because Maya and maybe a few other people, a lot of people said, like, they should have ended up together, or Martha should have, like, moved on. And everyone said that, like, an alternative ending would be, I'm pretty sure everyone said that an alternative ending would be Martha staying alive and either them having a relationship or Martha living a queer life. I don't think there would have been another alternative because of the time and because of the norms with homosexual characters. I think this was the only alternative for the time. I think she had to be killed off or the movie wouldn't have been allowed to be produced. If it was now, I think there were a ton of possibilities, but for that time, for the context, I don't think the movie would have had a different ending. And although I wish that Martha would have realized that she was not unnatural, I don't think that would have been allowed because of the production code, the Hollywood norms, all of that. And then that's basically, I think, most of what we talked about. Yeah.